Four twin girls are kicked out of a rich classmate's birthday party. But when the girl's billionaire father discovers the real reason, he takes action that leaves everyone speechless. The bell rang, announcing the end of class. 23 5-year-olds rushed to the classroom door, eager to meet their parents waiting in the courtyard of the prestigious St. Michael's Academy. Only two remained seated, calmly organizing their matching, well-worn colored pencils, one set for each. Elise and Claire Parker looked so alike that even their teachers would mix them up. They both had brown hair cascading in soft curls over their shoulders, big attentive eyes, and a shy smile they showed only to their mother. They were the only students not wearing the complete school uniform, just the mandatory white shirt combined with simple skirts sewn at home. "Ready to go, girls?" Miss Ann Miller, their teacher, asked kindly. She had a special fondness for the twins. She knew they were on scholarship, and that their mother worked hard to keep them at the school. "Yes, Ms. Miller," they answered in unison, as they always did. As they walked through the school's gleaming hallway, they could see clusters of children who completely ignored them. It wasn't deliberate cruelty. At 5 years old, kids naturally flocked to others who looked and lived like them. And the Parker twins, with their simple outfits and basic lunches, did not resemble anyone else there. Out in the courtyard, Sophie Parker was already waiting for them. Unlike the other mothers who wore designer clothes and drove fancy cars, Sophie arrived on foot, always in the same faded blue coat and carrying a large bag filled with sewing scraps and small tailoring jobs she would work on while waiting. "Mommy!" The girls ran toward her, their faces instantly lighting up. Sophie knelt down and opened her arms to receive them. "How is your day, my little ones?" "Normal," answered Elise, the chattier of the two. Claire just shrugged, gripping the strap of her backpack a bit tighter. Normal for them meant spending the whole day being politely overlooked. They played together during recess, ate lunch together, and did all the activities as a pair. Not by choice, but because no one else invited them. On their way out, they passed a group of stylish mothers and their children. At the center stood Megan Edwards, the most popular girl in the class. The only child of Philip Edwards, owner of one of the largest tech companies in the country. Megan was always surrounded by friends and received invitations to all the parties. "Look who's leaving. Those weird twins," one child said, not exactly in a whisper. Sophie squeezed her daughter's hands and kept walking, pretending not to hear. She was used to it. When she secured the scholarship for the twins, she knew it would be tough but believed that the privileged education would be worth any sacrifice. "Don't pay attention to that," Sophie whispered. "Let's go home. I'll make hot chocolate today." Their small apartment was a 20-minute walk from the school. It was on the 3rd floor of an old building with no elevator, but it had large windows that let in plenty of light, essential for Sophie's work. In the 2-bedroom apartment, the living room had been turned into a small sewing workshop. A dress form stood in one corner, surrounded by carefully stacked fabrics, and the old sewing machine, an heirloom from Sophie's grandmother, took up most of the table by the window. While Sophie prepared the promised hot chocolate, the twins sat at the small kitchen table and took out the day's schoolwork from their backpacks. "Ms. Miller said my drawing was the best in class today," Claire mentioned, showing a colorful sketch. "It's beautiful, my treasure," Sophie said with a smile, pouring the chocolate into well-used but spotless mugs. "What about you, Elise?" "I got a star in math," she replied, proudly showing her notebook with a gold star in the corner of the page. "My little geniuses," Sophie kissed each one on the forehead. That was when she noticed a colorful envelope sticking out of Claire's backpack. "What's this?" Claire looked surprised, as if she had forgotten about it. "Oh," the teacher handed it out to everyone before we left. Elise quickly opened her backpack and took out an identical envelope. "It's an invitation." Sophie took one of the envelopes. It was made of expensive pearlescent paper, decorated with tiny sparkling crystals and gold lettering that read, "Megan Edwards invites you to her birthday party." Were we really invited to Megan's party? Sophie couldn't hide the surprise in her voice. The twins exchanged glances, a rare spark of hope lighting up their eyes. Megan had never spoken to them before, let alone invited them anywhere. "Do you think we can go, Mommy?" Elise asked in a near whisper, as though speaking louder might make the invitation vanish. Sophie opened the envelope and read the invitation. It was for the following Saturday, at the lavish Edwards Manor on the outskirts of town. The theme was fairy tale princesses, and children were asked to dress accordingly. "Well," Sophie hesitated. Buying princess costumes was out of the question. It would cost almost a month's rent, and making something comparable to what the other children would wear would be difficult with the limited materials she had on hand. But then she saw the hope in her daughter's eyes. For the first time, they wouldn't be left out. Maybe this was the start of something new. Friendships, acceptance, a chance to belong. "Of course you can go," she finally decided. "I'll make the most beautiful dresses you've ever seen." The twins squealed with delight and jumped from their chairs, hugging their mother tightly. "I want to be Belle," Elise exclaimed. "I want to be Cinderella," said Claire at the same time. Sophie laughed. "I'll start working on them tonight." That night, after the girls went to bed, Sophie stayed up late sketching dress designs. She planned to use the best scraps she had saved, leftovers from wealthier clients' sewing projects. She had some sequins and satin ribbons stored away that could add a special touch. In the following days, Sophie worked tirelessly. During the day, she handled her regular sewing tasks, alterations, small repairs, and the occasional new garment for loyal clients. At night, she devoted herself to the girls' dresses, sewing until her fingers ached. The twins noticed a change in how their classmates behaved almost immediately after the invitations were handed out. Suddenly, some children started talking to them during recess, asking if they too were going to the party. "Are you really going?" Abby, one of Megan's closest friends, asked with barely disguised disbelief. "Yes," Elise answered with a shy smile. "Our mom is making our dresses." "Oh." Abby's tone clearly showed what she thought about homemade dresses. "I'm wearing a dress my mom bought in New York. It's just like the one Princess Charlotte wore." Claire squeezed her sister's hand tightly. It didn't matter what Abby thought. They had been invited, and that was all that mattered. On Friday, the day before the party, Sophie finally finished the dresses. They weren't as extravagant as the ones the other girls would probably wear, but they were pretty and made with love. For Elise, a yellow dress with gold details inspired by Belle, adorned with small hand-sewn fabric roses on the skirt. For Claire, a light blue dress with a shimmering overlay reminiscent of Cinderella, decorated with tiny silver stars. "Come see," Sophie called to the girls, who were doing their homework in the kitchen. The twins ran into the living area and stopped, mouths agape, at the sight of the dresses displayed on two small dress forms Sophie used for work. Are these for us?" Claire asked, stepping carefully toward the blue dress. "Yes, my darling." "Try them on." The girls put on the dresses carefully, as though they were made of glass. When Sophie finished buttoning each one in the back, she guided them to the full-length mirror she used for client fittings. The reflection showed two real princesses, their eyes shining with excitement. "We look beautiful, Mommy," Elise exclaimed, twirling to see the yellow skirt flare out like a flower. "Yes, you do." Sophie felt her eyes water. Her daughters deserved so much more than the difficult life they led. They deserved to be accepted, to have friends, to go to parties like any other child. "Tomorrow you'll be the prettiest princesses at the party." The big day arrived. Sophie woke up early to prepare everything. She styled the girls' hair in elaborate ways, interlaced braids with ribbons for Claire, and a low bun adorned with small fabric flowers for Elise. She applied very light makeup, just a bit of gloss and a little blush for color. "The present," Elise suddenly remembered. "We need to bring a gift for Megan." Sophie had already thought of that. With the little money she managed to save, she bought an illustrated storybook. It wasn't the most expensive one in the store, but it had beautiful images and classic tales any child would love. "Here it is," she said, showing them the package wrapped in colorful paper and a handmade bow. "You can give it to her together." Edward's manor was a 30-minute bus ride away. Sophie couldn't afford a taxi, and taking the bus with two little princesses would be an adventure in itself. People on the bus smiled at the sight of the twins in their princess dresses. An elderly lady even commented on how adorable they looked, making the girls blush with delight. When they finally arrived at the gates of the imposing property, the reality of the social gap between them and the other guests became even more apparent. Luxury cars came and went, dropping off children dressed as if they had come straight out of a Disney production, accompanied by elegantly dressed parents or nannies. "Come on, girls." Sophie adjusted the ribbons on their dresses one last time and held their hands. At the entrance, a man in a suit was checking invitations. "Names, please." "Elise and Claire Parker," Sophie answered. The man glanced at a list. "Ah, yes, the Parker twins." There was something odd in his tone, but Sophie ignored it. "You may go in. Mom, you can drop them off and return to pick them up at 6 p.m. Sophie hesitated. The other mothers seemed to be entering the party as well. "The invited adults are in the West Wing," the man explained, noticing her confusion. "The children's party is in the East Wing." I wasn't invited," Sophie admitted quietly, "so the girls wouldn't hear. I just came to drop them off." "I understand," he nodded. "Then please come back at 6 p.m. Sophie knelt to look her daughters in the eye. "Mommy has to go now." "You're going to have fun, and I'll be back to pick you up at 6, all right?" "You're not staying?" Claire asked, a note of anxiety in her voice. "It's a children's party, sweetheart. I'll come back soon. Behave and be kind to everyone." With one last hug, Sophie left the girls in the care of one of the party organizers who would guide them to the ballroom. Walking down the long corridor decorated with balloons and streamers, Elise and Claire held hands tightly. They were nervous but also excited. For the first time, they were going to be part of something special. The ballroom was dazzling. Decorated like a real fairy tale castle, it had a golden throne on a central stage, tables draped in fine linens, fresh flower arrangements everywhere, and even a chocolate fountain. Dozens of children were already playing, running around and chatting, all dressed as fairy tale characters. As soon as the twins entered, however, they sensed something strange. Several children stopped what they were doing and looked at them. These were not looks of welcome, but of surprise and confusion. "They're the weird twins," whispered a girl dressed as Snow White, not very discreetly. "What are they doing here?" asked another. Elise and Claire timidly moved to a corner of the room, still holding hands. Their dresses, which had looked so lovely at home, now seemed too simple compared to the professional costumes the other children wore. Some mothers, who were there despite the party being just for kids, watched the twins with expressions ranging from pity to discomfort. "Who are those girls?" one mother asked another. "They're the scholarship kids in Megan's class." No idea why they were invited. Elise and Claire, despite their age, understood the tone of the remarks. Instinctively, they huddled closer together, creating their own tiny island of security amidst a sea of strange looks. "Maybe we should give her the present," Claire suggested in almost a whisper. Elise nodded, holding onto the package as if it were a shield. Maybe when they gave Megan her gift, she would notice them and introduce them to the others. Maybe everything would improve. But as they searched for the birthday girl, a group of girls approached them. In the middle stood Megan Edwards, dressed as a stunning sleeping beauty. Megan stopped in front of the twins, her Aurora costume glittering under the ballroom lights. Elise and Claire clutched the gift in trembling hands, shy smiles on their faces. "You actually came," Megan said, her 5-year-old voice carrying an odd tone. Elise held out the package. "Happy birthday, Megan." Megan didn't take the present. Behind her, Abby and other girls whispered and giggled. The room grew quieter as more children gathered around. "Why are you wearing those dresses?" Megan asked, pointing to the twins' clothes. Our mom made them, Claire answered softly. She's a seamstress. Abby stepped forward. They look like old curtains, she teased, provoking laughter. The twins' cheeks burned with embarrassment. The circle of children around them grew quickly. You shouldn't be here, Megan declared, folding her arms. This party is for my friends. But we got invitations, Elise protested, pulling the envelope from her pocket. Megan snatched the invitation from her hand. My mum said I had to invite everyone in class, Bo, but she didn't know that included you. You're on scholarship, Abby added. You shouldn't even be at our school. The children started pointing. One of the mothers approached, more out of curiosity than concern. What's going on, sweetie? She asked Megan. They weren't really invited, Megan replied. They're the poor girls in my class. The woman looked at the twins with discomfort. She did nothing to help them, simply turning to speak with another mother. Look at their shoes, shouted a boy dressed as a prince. Claire lowered her gaze to her worn-out shoes, tears beginning to form. And those hairstyles, commented another girl. They look like they did them themselves. Elise dropped the gift, which fell to the floor. Megan picked it up and tore off the wrapping without care. A book. What a boring present, she declared, tossing it back onto the floor. One of the girls stepped on its pages on purpose, crumpling them. The other children laughed even louder. Trash princesses, someone shouted. Your dresses look like rags, shouted another. Claire was openly crying now, tears streaming down her face. Elise tried to stay strong, but her lips trembled so badly she could barely speak. A party staff member finally approached, drawn by the commotion. What's going on here? She asked. They're not supposed to be at my party, Megan explained. I want them out. The woman looked at the crying twins, then at the group of children laughing, and finally at the mothers, who simply watched without intervening. Come with me, girls, she said, taking them by the hands. We'll figure this out. As they were led out of the ballroom, the laughter and insults continued. Some kids even left their seats to follow the little group down the corridor, pointing and jeering. Go back to your poor neighborhood. Fake princesses. We don't want you here. At the reception area, the staff member called security. Pierre, I need you to escort these girls out, she instructed. Apparently, there was a misunderstanding with their invitation. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Elise insisted, tears finally spilling from her eyes. The teacher gave invitations to everyone. The staff member sighed. I'll call your mother. What's her number? Between sobs, Claire recited the phone number. The woman made the call quickly, choosing her words carefully. There's been a problem at the party. The girls are upset. It would be best if you could come pick them up. The security guard looked at the twins with pity. Let's wait outside, he said kindly. At that moment, more children appeared in the corridor, pointing and laughing. Megan was among them, her glittering dress a stark contrast to the twins' red, tear-streaked faces. Get them out of here, Megan ordered like a little queen. They're ruining my party. The guard cast a disapproving look at Megan but said nothing. Instead, he held out his hands to the twins. Let's go outside where it's quieter, he suggested. Elise and Claire, still holding hands, followed him in silence. They just wanted their mother. They just wanted to go home and forget all this. On the way to the front garden, they passed more party guests who had come out to watch the expulsion. It was like a small crowd following condemned criminals to the gallows. That's why people like you shouldn't try to be like us, said an older girl as they passed by. You'll never make it. The security guard quickened his pace. Don't listen to them, he muttered. When they finally reached the garden by the entrance, he led them to a bench away from the main door. You can wait for your mum here, he said. I'll stay with you. The twins sat in silence, their small hands still clasped together as if they only had each other in the entire world. Claire sobbed softly, while Elise stared at her shoes, letting her tears fall freely now. Why do they hate us? Claire asked after a few minutes. The guard knelt in front of them. They don't hate you. They just don't know how to be kind yet. Are our dresses really that ugly? Elise asked, gazing at the yellow dress her mother had chosen with so much care. No, the man assured her. "Your dresses are lovely, very lovely." But even his kind words couldn't counter the humiliation they felt. At 5 years old, they had just learned a cruel lesson about how the world saw people like them. After what felt like an eternity, but was only about 15 minutes, Sophie arrived, rushing over. As soon as they saw their mother, the twins jumped from the bench and ran into her arms, breaking into fresh tears. "What happened?" Sophie asked, kneeling to embrace them. "They laughed at us," Claire sobbed. "They said we didn't belong here," Elise added. Sophie looked at the security guard, who approached with a solemn expression. "There was an incident at the party," he explained. "The girls weren't treated kindly." Sophie understood instantly. Her face showed a mix of pain and anger. She hugged her daughters tighter. "Let's go home," she said softly. As they left along the stone pathway, the twins took one last look at the imposing mansion where they had dreamt of being princesses for a day. The colorful lights still glowed in the windows, the music still played, and the laughter of the other children still echoed in the air. Their pretty dresses, made with so much love, now felt unbearably heavy. The magic was gone, leaving only harsh reality. "I never want to be a princess again," Claire murmured to her sister. "Me neither," Elise agreed. Sophie overheard their brief exchange, and her heart broke into 1,000 pieces. What kind of world teaches such young children to despise others over money? What kind of society allows cruelty to be normalized like that? Waiting at the bus stop, the three remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The twins, so young, had just received a lesson many adults never need to learn. Some doors simply don't open for people like them, no matter how hard they try. Philip Edwards parked his Bentley at the entrance of Edwards Manor. He was late for his daughter's birthday party due to a business meeting he couldn't reschedule. Work always came first. That's how he had built his empire. Entering the grand hall, he sensed something off. The staff seemed tense, exchanging nervous glances when they saw him. Marie, the event planner, approached with a forced smile. "Mr. Edwards, so glad you could make it. The party is going very well." Philip looked around, suspicious. "Where's Megan?" "In the main ballroom with her guests," Marie replied quickly. "She's having a wonderful time." Philip nodded and walked down the hall. Something felt out of place. As he passed the security office, he saw Pierre, head of security, watching the surveillance monitors with a worried expression. "Is there a problem?" Philip asked, stopping in the doorway. Pierre startled. "No, sir, everything's under control." Philip entered the room and looked at the screens. "I want to see the recordings from the last 30 minutes. "Sir, I don't think—" "The recordings, Pierre, now." The security guard hesitated but obeyed. He typed a few commands into the computer, and the screens showed footage from the ballroom. Philip watched closely as the system replayed recent events. He saw his daughter at the center of a group, confronting two small girls in simple dresses. He turned up the volume and heard the cruel words, the laughter, the insults. He saw the twins being escorted out in tears and watched Megan and the other children mocking them to the very end. His face hardened. "Who are those girls?" Pierre swallowed hard. "They're the Parker twins, scholarship students in Megan's class. And where are they now?" "They left with their mother a few minutes ago." Philip stood silently, processing what he'd just seen. His own daughter had humiliated two children for being poor. Worse yet, it seemed orchestrated, from the invitations to the public humiliation. What happened to them? The security guard escorted them outside. Their mother came to pick them up. They were really upset. Shame and guilt washed over Philip. He didn't recognize the girl in the video. Could that truly be his daughter? Or had he just never noticed? The truth hit him like a punch. Maybe this was exactly the daughter he had raised. A spoiled, selfish child who'd never heard no, who always got what she wanted, who viewed people as inferior. "Where can I get their address?" he asked suddenly. Pierre opened a file. "Their mother's name is Sophie Parker. She lives in Brookside Heights. She's a seamstress." Philip nodded, committing the information to memory. Without another word, he left the security office, his normally calm face now set with determination. He strode quickly to the ballroom. The celebration continued as if nothing had happened. Children running around, parents chatting in small groups, music playing. In the center of it all, Megan laughed with her friends, her tiara shining under the lights. Philip headed straight for the stage where the band was performing. He signaled for them to stop and took the microphone. The music cut off abruptly, drawing everyone's attention. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice echoing through the ballroom. The guests turned around, surprised. Megan smiled when she saw her father, waving excitedly. "Thank you all for coming," Philip continued, "but before anything else, I need to address something that happened here today." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Megan stopped smiling, sensing something was wrong. "Not long ago, 2 little girls were humiliated and forced out of this party," he said. 2 5-year-olds who received invitations, came in their nicest clothes, brought a present and were treated like they didn't belong. Nervous murmurs spread through the crowd. Mothers glanced at each other uneasily. The children were confused. "I just watched the security footage," he went on, scanning the room with his gaze. "I saw my daughter, Megan, leading a cruel attack on 2 classmates whose only crime was coming from a family with less money." Megan's face paled. She had never seen her father so serious, so disappointed. "I also saw many of your children joining her, laughing and mocking, and adults, parents standing by, doing nothing to stop it." Philip paused, now looking directly at Megan. "My daughter, come here." Megan didn't move, frozen with fear. "Megan, come here now," Philip repeated, his voice firm. Reluctantly, she walked to the stage, climbing the small steps with her head down. Philip knelt to her eye level. "Do you know what you did wrong today?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Megan shook her head no, tears starting to form. "You humiliated 2 children who did nothing to you, 2 little girls who just wanted to be your friends. You teased them because they were poor, because they wore dresses their mom made." Tears streamed down Megan's cheeks now. "And the worst part, you planned it. You let them receive invitations knowing you'd embarrass them in front of everyone." Philip stood and spoke into the microphone again. "This shows that I have failed as a father, failed terribly. I raised a daughter who thinks she can treat people this way because of money." A few mothers began to gather their things discreetly, sensing the party was about to end on a very sour note. "The party is over," Philip announced. "I'm asking everyone to leave immediately." The guests looked at one another in shock. "This isn't a request," he added, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The party is finished. I want everyone out in 15 minutes. A murmur filled the ballroom as people started moving, grabbing coats and calling for their children. Philip turned back to Megan, who was openly sobbing by now. "As for you, young lady, we're going to have a long talk about respect and consequences." Megan looked at her father, her small face flushed and wet. "But, Dad, everyone does that to them at school." Philip felt another blow. The situation was worse than he'd imagined. "That's no excuse," he said firmly. "It's even worse. It means you're not only cruel, you're a follower, without the courage to do what's right." He took his daughter's hand and led her off the stage. Guests moved aside as they passed, some embarrassed, others outraged at the sudden end to the party. Stopping in the middle of the ballroom, still holding Megan's hand, Philip addressed the crowd one last time. "Before you leave, I want you to know something," he said loudly. "Tomorrow, I will personally visit those little girls home to apologize for what my daughter did and what all of you allowed." He looked directly at some parents he knew. "I suggest you do the same with your children. What happened today was unacceptable." A heavy silence fell over the group as Philip exited the ballroom with Megan, leaving behind a ruined party and dozens of guests in shock. In the corridor, away from prying eyes, Philip finally let go of his daughter's hand. "Go to your room," he ordered. "Stay there until I come up." Megan ran upstairs, still crying. Philip watched her disappear down the hall, his heart heavy with a mix of disappointment and determination. He had a lot of work to do to repair the damage he had done in raising his daughter, and the first step would be finding Elise and Claire Parker and their mother. Sunday dawned grey. Sophie woke up early and went straight to check on the girls. Elise and Claire were still asleep, curled up in the same bed as they always did when they felt sad or scared. Their faces, even in sleep, wore an expression of sorrow. Sophie sighed and gently closed the door. In the small kitchen, she prepared hot chocolate and sliced some bread for breakfast. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the events of the previous day, to the humiliation her daughters had suffered. Anger and helplessness formed a knot in her throat. When the twins finally woke up and shuffled into the kitchen, still in their pajamas with puffy eyes, Sophie tried to smile. "Good morning, my little ones," she said as cheerily as she could. "I made hot chocolate for you." The girls sat quietly at the table. Their usual energy, the chatter about dreams or plans for the day, was absent. "I know yesterday was hard," Sophie began, sitting with them, "but you're strong and smart girls. Tomorrow is a new day and—" "I don't want to go back to school," Claire interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. Elise nodded in agreement. "They'll all laugh at us." Sophie felt her heart tighten. Under normal circumstances, she would emphasize the importance of education and resilience. But now, looking at her daughter's downcast faces, she hesitated. "No one's going to laugh at you," she tried to assure them, not entirely convinced herself. "You didn't see how they looked at us," Elise said. "How they talked. Everyone at school is going to know what happened." "What if Megan tells everyone?" Claire asked, tears forming again. Sophie pulled their chairs closer and hugged them. "Listen, sweethearts, I know it hurts, I know it's hard. But we can't let people like Megan and her friends decide what you can or can't do." The twins remained silent, small tears rolling down their cheeks. Sophie knew that, as sincere as her words were, they couldn't erase the humiliation her daughters had experienced. "What if," Claire began softly, "what if we change schools?" The question took Sophie by surprise. Their scholarship at St. Michael's Academy was a rare opportunity, something she had fought hard for, which could give the girls a better future. "It's not that simple, my darling," she explained. "That school might open doors for you someday." "What doors?" Elise asked, unusually bitter for a 5-year-old. "We already saw that the party doors were closed to us." Sophie didn't know how to reply. How could she explain to a child the complexities of social mobility, of education as a tool for advancement, when all that child knew was the pain of rejection? The rest of the morning passed slowly. The twins stayed in the living room, drawing in silence, while Sophie worked on her sewing machine, trying to focus on alterations she needed to deliver on Monday. But her thoughts kept returning to the dilemma: force her children to face the hostile school environment or look for other options. The doorbell rang in the early afternoon, pulling her out of her thoughts. Sophie was puzzled. They rarely received visitors, especially on a Sunday. Opening the door, she froze in surprise. Standing there was Philip Edwards, the billionaire, Megan's father, dressed casually yet still far too elegant for her modest building. "Mrs. Parker?" he asked. "Sophie Parker?" Sophie nodded, momentarily speechless. "I'm Philip Edwards, Megan's father," he said, extending his hand. "May I speak with you?" Sophie hesitated before shaking his hand. "My daughters are very upset, Mr. Edwards. I don't know if a visit right now is—" "I completely understand," he interrupted gently. "But that's exactly why I'm here. I'd like to apologize in person for what happened yesterday." His sincerity made Sophie reconsider. After a moment, she opened the door a bit wider. "Please come in, but I must warn you, the girls are really shaken." Philip stepped into the small apartment, acutely aware of the contrast between his presence and the modest surroundings. The living area, also Sophie's sewing workshop, was neat and organized, but clearly belonged to someone with limited means. The twins looked up from their drawings when a stranger entered, They recognized him immediately from the occasional news articles or TV reports. Megan's father, the wealthy man who seemed to own half the city. "Hello," Philip said, kneeling to their level. "You must be Elise and Claire." The girls glanced at their mother, seeking guidance. "This is Mr. Edwards," Sophie explained. "He came to talk with us." "I came to apologize," Philip added, "for what my daughter did yesterday. It was unforgivable." The twins remained silent, watching him with a mix of distrust and curiosity. "Last night, after I found out what happened," Philip went on, "I ended the party. I sent everyone home and told them they should be ashamed of what they did." Sophie's eyes widened, surprised. "You ended your daughter's birthday party?" Philip nodded. "It was the right thing to do. What Megan did, what all those guests allowed to happen, was cruel and unfair. Megan said we didn't belong there," Elise ventured, always the braver one. "She was wrong," Philip replied firmly. "You had every right to be there. You were invited. And your dresses." He glanced at the princess dresses hanging nearby. They were beautiful. "Your mom is very talented." Claire inched a bit closer, still wary. "The other kids laughed at us." "I know," Philip said, "and I made sure to talk to their parents afterward. What happened doesn't reflect who you are, but who they are." Sophie watched the interaction carefully. There was something genuine about how Philip spoke to the girls. No condescension, just honest respect for two little humans who had been wronged. "The girls are afraid of going back to school tomorrow," Sophie explained, taking a seat beside them. "They think everyone will laugh at them." Philip considered for a moment. "I understand their fear. In their shoes, I'd be scared too." He turned to Elise and Claire. "But I promise I'll speak to the principal first thing tomorrow morning. I'll make sure no one laughs at you, and that Megan apologizes publicly." Elise and Claire exchanged skeptical looks. Even at Five Eye, they knew the world didn't change that easily. "Why are you doing this?" Elise asked suddenly. The direct question took Philip by surprise. He paused before answering. "Because I failed as a father," he finally admitted. "I let my daughter become someone who hurts others, and when we do something wrong, we need to make it right." He glanced at Sophie. "And also because no child should go through what your daughters went through yesterday." "None." A silence fell as everyone absorbed his words. In that little apartment, something subtle was changing, a first step, perhaps, toward making amends. "They earned that scholarship on merit," Sophie finally said. "They're smart, dedicated. They deserve to be at that school as much as anyone else." "I know," Philip agreed. "And I'll make sure everyone else at the school knows it too." He stood, realizing he shouldn't overstay his welcome. "May I come back tomorrow to see how their day at school went?" Sophie hesitated, but nodded. "Yes, you can." Philip waved gently at the twins. "Be brave tomorrow. Sometimes facing our fears is the only way to overcome them." As Sophie walked him to the door, Philip made one last remark. "Those dresses you made, they really are lovely. You have a rare gift, Mrs. Parker." Sophie blushed slightly, unused to compliments, especially from someone like him. "Thank you," she replied simply. After Philip left, Sophie returned to the living area, where Elise and Claire were waiting with questioning looks. "Does this mean we have to go to school tomorrow?" Claire asked. Sophie took a deep breath. "We'll see how you feel in the morning, all right?" As it was, she was still unsure. Her daughters needed time to recover. The heartbreak was too raw. Meanwhile, heading down the stairs of the modest building, Philip Edwards was already making phone calls, first to his lawyer, then to the principal of St. Michael's Academy. There was a lot of work to do to fix the damage caused by his daughter, and he was determined to do it properly. The next morning, Sophie was up before her alarm. She'd spent the night thinking about Philip Edwards's visit and his promises. Part of her wanted to believe things might change, but experience had taught her not to trust pretty words from the rich too easily. The twins were still asleep when she started making breakfast. She let them rest a bit longer before confronting the decision of whether or not to go to school. The doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m., surprising Sophie. When she opened the door, there stood Philip Edwards, dressed in a neat but subdued suit. "Good morning, Mrs. Parker," he greeted. "I hope I'm not too early." Sophie straightened the apron she wore over her simple dress. "We're just getting ready for school, or trying to decide if the girls will actually go." "I see," Philip said. "May I come in? I'd like to talk before you decide." Sophie hesitated, then stepped aside.